2% of their historic range. So I like to give people just the scientific facts, and then you can start to make your own conclusions about prairie dogs. They are a keystone species. They are the source of food and livelihood for hundreds of animals, the Gunnison prairie dog. There are 5 species of prairie dogs in North America. Ours are the Gunnison prairie dog. Colorado, however, has 3 of them, or 4 of them. There's the Gunnison, there's the blacktail, there's the whitetail, there's the Mexican and Utah. Very interestingly, our geography has shaped, and please, y'all, just look around me and enjoy everything behind me as I'm talking. Our mountains have shaped the species that we have. So if you drive across the Dallas Divide, that divide has speciated the Gunnison prairie dog from the whitetail prairie dog. So when you get to Montrose and you're kind of at Chiquitas and you look around in some of the fields there, you'll see the whitetail prairie dog. And if you're very observant, you will immediately notice the difference between the Gunnison and the whitetail prairie dog. These guys are much more buff. The whitetails are lighter colored, and the mountains, the pass, the divide has allowed them to speciate over the years. Prairie dogs have been here for 30,000 years. They co-evolved with the bison. The bison herds tramped the plains down. The prairie dogs aerated the soil. They are nature's architects, simply put. We have a massive, huge Ogallala aquifer in the Great Plains, and it's filled with water. It's provided the source. That's how humanity is able to be on the Great Plains. And the prairie dog holes, because they excavate the earth, the water is able to infiltrate those holes over the eons, and that provided that aquifer. Laura.
Can you just quickly explain what a keystone species?
Oh yeah, and I will. Okay, so keystone. Why do we care about prairie dogs? Why do I care? Why should anybody? Keystone. It's a biological term, iconic biological term. A arch that's built by bricks. 1, 2, 3, 4. The keystone is this brick right here. You take the keystone away, the arch collapses, simply put. For children, I like to call it the hub on a bicycle, and Melissa would probably appreciate that more. The hub, you take the hub away from a bicycle spoke, you don't have a tire anymore, it collapses. Why is it a keystone species? First of all, it completely alters the mosaic of these upper montane bench grasslands and the northern plains, because it excavates, because it aerates, because it creates mounds. The mounds that people mostly detest because they are aesthetically unpleasing are biologically hugely important because they bring that earth up, and they're tilling it up, which is what a farmer does with a plow, and therefore seeds can come and be around the mounds. And scientists have done countless studies where the diversity where the prairie dog mounds are, the forb and grass diversity is greatly increased because of the prairie dogs, precisely because of their tilling activities. So what we find aesthetically unpleasing is nature's way of lending biodiversity and tilling and refreshing the earth and adding water to the earth. So I think as we move into the future, it's the prairie dogs, keystone species. A lot of animals predate on the prairie dogs: coyotes, badgers. We have a bobcat in situ on the western end here. Red foxes. Those are predators. Ferruginous hawks, red-tailed hawks. I could keep going on. Bobcat, lynx, bears, ferrets, black-footed ferrets. Quintessential, beautiful biological concept. Black-footed ferret is what we call an obligate predator of a prairie dog. It would not exist without the prairie dog. Indeed, since we decimated the prairie and prairie dogs with massive poisoning campaigns, black-footed ferrets almost went extinct in the 70s when I was going into grade school or junior high. We thought the black-footed ferret was extinct, and then they found a black-footed ferret in Wyoming, in Mitsitsi, Wyoming, and a rancher saw it and he goes, "What the hell is this thing?" And he brought it to a Division of Wildlife guy, and they said, "Holy shit, this is a black-footed ferret." They ran out to his land. This rancher did not decimate his prairie dogs. He had the last colony of black-footed ferrets left in the world. The biological folks went crazy. It became hugely controversial. They wanted to scoop all these guys up immediately because they're really, 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 really endangered. I think there were like 15 individuals, and that's indeed what they did. It was controversial because people were like, "Don't grab the black-footed ferrets, let them be." There was that side, which I can appreciate, and there was the other side that wanted to control, manage, save what was left. And black-footed ferrets are like prairie dogs. They're extremely fragile species. They only eat prairie dogs. They'll eat a couple things on the side, but because the prairie dog colonies and prairie dogs have been decimated, the black-footed ferrets just went shoo. And so that relationship was destroyed because they are such keystone species. They did bring the black-footed ferret populations up. Actually, in northern Colorado, UNC and CSU has a black-footed ferret breeding extension there, and they are trying to relocate and re-release black-footed ferrets into places that they have historically been. It's a very tricky process. They require very large colonies. People ask me, can we put black-footed ferrets on our colony? Absolutely not. There are nowhere near enough prairie dogs to sustain a couple of black-footed ferrets. They're ravenous predators of prairie dogs. They eat.
Were there black-footed ferrets here?
Yes,
Ever?
historically, yes,
okay.
yes, absolutely. They were contiguous with all the prairie dog colonies in North America. They quickly collapsed when we started hunting and persecuting prairie dogs because of the ranching ethic that these animals are competing with cattle for forage. That's been completely, not completely, but mostly dismantled because prairie dogs actually add nutrient value to the soil through their nitrogen and urine deposits. They mow the native grasses down to a low mat of nutritious, highly nitrogen content grasses. But they have shown over and over that elk, deer, pronghorn, cattle prefer to forage, and this is living proof. Our elk are largely on our prairie dog colony, the old colony that's been watered out and moved out because whatever, I'm not going to get into the politics. The prairie dogs like to be there, and I mean the elk like to be there. The prairie dogs restored that land in my mind. It's much more diverse than what we have here. If you look out at this grassland right here, I would say that 99% of those grasses are non-native. All I'm seeing is mountain timothy, which is a European species, Kentucky bluegrass, orchard grass, brome grass, all brought in by ranchers turned the century to graze cattle, European cattle on. There used to be bunch grasses here, mountain muley, fescues, and they were adapted to this climate. The prairie dogs adapted to eat them. They mowed it down to a low mat of grass, which is what animals prefer. Grazing, they call them mega herbivores. Mega herbivores prefer to graze on those things. And so, I mean, just watch and look at the species of flowers and plants over on the old colony and compare it to this. This is managed for European cattle. So I'm getting a little political here, but it's also scientific. If you start to look at if you take a botanist, which we'll have in our next,
22nd.
she can help and she can maybe reconfirm some of my thoughts about what percentage is non-native out here. It's a very, very high percentage. So, keystone species. What else do prairie dogs provide besides predation? Their homes and their burrows are hugely important to amphibians, rattlesnakes. Burrowing owls also have a symbiotic relationship with prairie dogs because they put their nests down in the holes, and you often on the Great Plains especially can see burrowing owls and a prairie dog side by side working, and they've evolved together. We have a species of bird called the mountain plover that's very endangered. Go figure. It puts its nest on prairie dog colonies, and so I have yet to see a mountain plover. Connie, have you seen one? Where are you?
No.
No. If you go down to Paradox Valley, you'll see a lot of burrowing owls.
Oh,
right
burrowing
next,
owls.
Yeah,
I would like
they're
to
so
go
fun.
see the burrowing owls, and
They're
maybe they
great.
can take me. But the mountain plover is an obligate nester of prairie dog mounts, and their populations are extremely threatened. They are not on the endangered species list because it becomes very difficult to put an animal on an endangered species list, as you all know, because of the government red tape, and the ranchers, especially in this area, block that sort of action. So maybe we can get ranchers to appreciate prairie dogs more. And that's kind of the thrust of this article. So what do? I mean, we have to grow food. We have to have livestock. What do we do? And we're going to go out in 1 minute. I think the answer is that ranchers can learn to appreciate, and there are ranchers that are working to keep prairie dogs on their properties, and they can coexist. And indeed, they have historically. That's exactly what the mega herbivores have lived with. They've evolved together. So, I have the article. I can talk 100 miles a minute. I have all sorts of natural history facts on the prairie dogs, and we'll go up and we'll observe them. They are colonial organisms. They do live in colonies. They do that adaptively for a reason. Obviously, the reason they do it the benefits must be greater than not being a colonial organism. A colonial organism is highly, highly endangered by spread of disease. Prairie dogs are 100% non-immune to the plague. You've all heard about the bubonic plague. People ask me, oh, can I get bitten by a prairie dog and will it kill me? Will I get the bubonic plague? I want to clear this up before we go out there. Plague is carried by a species of flea called Yersinia pestis. And if they have the bacteria, it's a gram-negative bacteria that is in the flea. If the flea happens to have the gram-negative bacteria and it bites this prairie dog, and you go into your burrow with Laura and these guys, and he's on there, and it's going to go and bite Laura, it's going to bite you, and you guys have not evolved, just like the Indians were non-immune to smallpox. I call the prairie dogs the little Indians that are left. Within 2 weeks, the colony will be decimated. They did not evolve with Yersinia pestis, the bacteria that came in on a ship with rats from Europe. And so you hear about these massive outbreaks of plague, especially in the Front Range area. It's because an animal has come in with the plague, it's gotten in onto one animal maybe, and spread because they are colonial organisms. So my point being, colonial organisms there's some downsides to being colonial. But the upsides of colonialism in prairie dogs, can anybody think of why, if you're a prairie dog, it would be beneficial adaptively to live in a colony?
More eyes.
More eyes, precisely.
Yeah,
Communication. So sociality comes obviously with coloniality. We're colonial social organisms. So more eyes. If you're a species of animal that is the Clark's grocery store of the West, it's going to behoove you to have a group of us that say, oh, wait a minute, there's a fridge in this hut, and there's that mama badger right over there, and I'm going to tell you, badger, beep, 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 beep. And they have a very advanced social system, and there's a guy down in Arizona at UNC, in Flagstaff, that has studied prairie dog language for 30 years, and he has mapped out the sonograms of the Khan Slovachkov. He is this incredibly brilliant, really funny guy. He's actually come out here, and prairie dogs will bark out the difference between badger, chirp, 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 between red fox, chirp, chirp, and between rattlesnake, chirp, 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 chirp. And as we go closer, they're going to start to chirp, and they have a code word for a big group of people from TI coming our way. And they're going to say that.
Kids when I bring them out here.
And so the benefits going back of colonial organisms are obviously, if you're a major prey species of North America, it has behooved them to have centuries throughout their colony that have all these eyes. And there are some dogs that are called century dogs. And obviously, so it's a group benefit. It's not an individualistic benefit. And colonial animals evolved entirely different than independent animals. But one of the problems emotionally with colonial animals, with us in ranching country, is when we see a group of prairie dogs and everybody does this, Ramona, you're full of shit. They are not endangered. I saw millions of them the other day when I was driving out to Norwood and Nuclear. There's thousands of them. Well, yeah, you see a group of colonial organisms all together on their little colony. They're called colony towns or villages. And yeah, it looks like there's thousands of them. Most animals don't congregate. If all the grizzly bears there are none. If all the bears and pumas were colonial and we saw them all out on the valley floor together, we'd also say there were hundreds of those guys. But they happen to evolve and to be, loners. So colonial organisms want to live together in their colonies, in their villages, in their towns. And they do have territories, and their territories are called coteries. And when we go down there, I want you guys to check it out. Usually a coterie consists of one or sometimes two males.